Stop being obsolete, Gina, is just a nuisance alarm. Derek Mallory said it over Channel 4 at 5:42, clipped and impatient, loud enough that Gina pictured every room in the plant hearing him. To Gina, the crux of that morning sat inside that sentence. She was trying to run the system the way chemistry and hydraulics required, and Derek was trying to run it the way a production schedule preferred. One of those frameworks bends. The other does not. The high Sump horn in Building C didn't care about tone, rank, or quarterly targets. It screamed in a steady, high metallic pulse that bounced off concrete walls and steel stairs and came back sharper each time. Red beacon, strobe every second. Panel text in hard white letters. C-B SMT, Sump level, HH/verify source, /auto shut enabled. Gina stood in front of it in a face shield and chemical gloves, one hand on the panel edge, the other wrapped around her radio, and watched the annunciator lights march left to right in a pattern she had learned to read, like weather. Behind her, pump vibration turned from a steady mechanical hum into an uneven rattle she felt through the soles of her boots. Somewhere below the grated trench cover, fluid was moving too fast for comfort. Pump B sounded wrong. Thin at first, then choppy, like it was swallowing gas pockets. Cavitation. She did not need a second opinion on that. She pressed transmit. Control, this is Dixon in C basement. Confirm I have high with unstable pump B and pH drift. I'm holding transfer pending verification. Static, then a younger voice from control. Copy, Dixon. We show alarm active and transfer queued on line 3 start command. Operations manager requesting clearance. She didn't answer him. She answered Derek. Derek, this is not nuisance behavior. I have cavitation and alkaline ingress signature in a neutral trench. I am not clearing line 3. A beat of radio silence, then Derek came back louder, as if volume could change what she had measured. You're always seeing ghosts when we're under load. Reset it and move. We're already behind. Gina turned and looked through the open doorway into the lower pump bay. 2 operators stood near the stair rail, both pretending to check tablets while listening to every word. They knew her. They knew she did not throw flags for sport. She keyed her radio again, keeping her voice flat. This isn't a ghost. pH probe in C trench is drifting above 12. That trench should be near neutral rinse during this phase. If caustic is in that sump, source isolation failed somewhere upstream. Derek didn't bother with technical language. He switched to hierarchy. Your job is to keep flow moving, Gina, not write mystery novels. The horn shrieked again. She glanced at the panel history and saw 3 prior acknowledgments in the overnight block, each one shorter than a minute apart, each one closed without corrective comment. Her jaw tightened. The acknowledgement mode icon stayed amber instead of returning green. Temporary silence had been used, then used again. She logged the screen with her hand held and time-stamped it automatically. 5:43:18. The basement air had the sour, stripped clean smell of fresh caustic where it didn't belong. That sharp chemical edge that made the back of her throat feel sanded. She stepped to the trench sample point, pulled a quick draw into a clear vial, dipped a strip, and watched it go dark blue almost instantly. She held the strip under her lamp and felt the old, cold certainty settle in her chest. She had worked corrosive service transfer systems for 14 years. Her certifications were not decorative letters after her name. They were the difference between nuisance alarms and early warnings. She made $118,000 a year because she kept ordinary mornings ordinary, because she could hear one unstable bearing over a room full of fans, because she remembered every near miss that never became a headline. "Derek," she said, "this is Gina Dixon, Senior Wastewater and Transfer Systems Technician, Class 2 Chemical Handling Certified. I am issuing a formal hold on Line 3 until we verify check valve integrity and sump source. That is procedure." He came back immediately, almost laughing. "Nobody cares what's printed on your badge right now. I need throughput. Lift throughput, not excuses." The two operators near the rail looked down at their tablets at the same time, synchronized by discomfort. Gina recognized the posture. Nobody wanted to stand in the blast line between a manager chasing numbers and a technician citing safeguards. She did not blame them. She had stood in that same posture as a rookie years ago, before she learned what silence could cost. By the second week of October, the plant had shifted into that end-of-quarter rhythm where every delayed truck felt like a personal insult to management. Extra calls, extra meetings, extra reminders about margins and penalties. To Gina, Derek carried those numbers like ammunition. Every hold, every inspection, every stop got translated into missed output. The resulting tension sat in every hallway conversation and every radio exchange. Gina climbed 2 steps onto the platform to get a better angle on the transparent section of return line. Intermittent froth streaked through the stream. Not constant. Pulsed. Surge behavior. She counted under her breath, matching interval to vibration. 4 seconds smooth, then chatter, then slap. Again. She keyed up. "Control, document this. Visible flow oscillation in C return with pump B cavitation. I'm requesting maintenance and 6-hour shutdown window." Before Control could reply, Derek cut in. "Denied. We are not dropping 6 hours because one tech got nervous at dawn." She looked at the red beacon. Then she looked at the door camera, where she knew the timestamp feed archived in real time. "This is not nerves. This is mechanism. If the check valve on line 3 is compromised, pressure surge backfeeds to the sump trench. If we charge transfer on this condition, inflow can outrun sump capacity." Derek's next line came with open contempt, the words sharpened for audience. "Listen to yourself. Obsolete. This is why younger crews run circles around you." One operator winced. The other kept his eyes on his screen and swallowed hard. Gina did not raise her voice. "Say whatever you want about me. The interlock doesn't care." Derek answered with a short bark of laughter. "Interlock? You treat alarms like commandments. They're tools. We can acknowledge and move." "They are tools," she said. "Tools that tell us where the plant is failing before it fails in public." He stepped into the basement doorway then, no longer content to argue over radio. Clean hard hat, clean jacket, no chemical splash marks. He had the look of someone visiting weather instead of living in it. He came down the first few stairs and pointed at the panel without looking closely at it. "Clear it." "No." He stopped mid-step, incredulous for half a second, then angry. "What did you say?" "I said no. I won't key in a bypass that defeats high shutdown on this alarm." "You will if you want to stay assigned here." She held his gaze. "If you need a formal sentence, I refuse unsafe operation under Plant Safety Policy Section 9.2. Record that." He leaned forward, voice low and hard enough to carry. "Don't play lawyer with me at 5:45 in the morning." "This isn't lawyering. This is containment," Derek glanced toward the operators as if polling for loyalty, then snapped his fingers once at Gina, dismissive, impatient. You're being lazy, same pattern. Any pressure, you hide behind procedure. The word landed harder than she expected, not because she believed it, but because she knew exactly what it was for. In industrial rooms, lazy was a social solvent. It stripped trust off whoever got tagged with it, especially in front of junior staff. She felt heat rise in her neck, then forced it down. Anger narrowed judgment. She needed judgment wide. Lazy is cheaper than a flooded electrical room, she said. He smiled without warmth. Dramatic now? She turned back to the panel and scrolled trend lines. Sump level had climbed in shallow steps, not a clean ramp, which suggested periodic surges rather than constant leak. That matched a chattering check valve upstream. She captured another screenshot with timestamp. 5:45:09. Her radio crackled. Dixon control. We need disposition. Transfer team is staged. Disposition is hold, she said. Repeat hold. Derek reached for her radio hand, not grabbing but crowding her space, and spoke directly toward her mic. Control disregard. Operations authorizes restart once alarm is silenced. Gina pulled the radio back and took one step away from him. Control log conflict, technician hold versus manager override, pending safety objection. Control hesitated. Logged. The horn kept pulsing. Red flash, white panel text, red flash again. Gina could feel each pulse in her chest now, not from fear exactly, but from recognition. She had seen this posture of events before: warning, dismissal, public pressure, substitution. It was an old pattern wearing a fresh badge. Derek turned toward the stairwell and called up, Milo, get down here. A young operator appeared at the landing, helmet slightly crooked, gloves tucked in his back pocket. Milo Trent had been on that unit less than 6 months, quick with screens, eager to prove he could carry more than cleanup and rounds. He looked from Derek to Gina and seemed to understand immediately that he had walked into a test he had not studied for. Derek pointed to Gina's station. You're taking over. If the panel chirps, hold alarm silence and keep line 3 flowing. Milo didn't move at first. Sir, high is active. Derek's answer came crisp and cold. That was an order. Gina met Milo's eyes. She kept her tone neutral, giving him one clear lifeline. You're allowed to refuse an unsafe command. Say you need safety review. Derek cut between them. No coaching. She's off the station. Then he raised his voice across the bay and delivered the line. Do your job or get off this site by lunch. The insult shock did not come as a single sting. It came layered. Obsolete over radio, lazy at the panel, and now a public threat tied to her paycheck and assignment. Around them, the plant kept moving. Fans, pumps, distant forklift reverse beeps, as if routine could absorb the fracture opening in the room. Gina stood with the horn still screaming, chemical strip still blue in her pocket, and the knowledge that she could be removed from the controls, but not from the record. She keyed her radio one more time, each word measured. Control, this is Dixon. I am filing immediate safety objection and process refusal on line 3 transfer under active high sump alarm in building C basement. Timestamp 5:46. Witnesses present. Static hissed. Then Control answered, quiet and formal. Received and logged. The words from Control were barely out when Derek jabbed a finger toward the panel and spoke to Milo like Gina was already gone. Take the seat. Acknowledge the horn. Start transfer when I say. Milo descended the last steps with the careful pace of someone walking across wet steel. The basement light cast him pale green under the fluorescence, and his eyes stayed fixed on the alarm banner instead of Derek's face. Gina saw his right hand hover near the silence key, then pull back. The horn cycled again, sharp enough to vibrate the panel door. Red strobe, 1 second cadence. She had heard that cadence in training videos and incident reports. It meant the system had crossed from warning into automatic protection territory. At 5:47, Gina moved to the trench rail and dropped her handheld probe into the sample port a second time. The display stabilized at pH 12.6, then climbed to 12.8. Neutral rinse water in that trench normally sat between 6.5 and 8.5 with slight drift from detergent carryover during wash phases. Above 12 meant sodium hydroxide presence and not trace contamination. She tilted the screen so Milo could see. "This isn't residual," she said, steady and loud enough for both men. "This is active caustic ingress. We have a source feeding this pit." Derek made a dismissive sound. "Probe drift. You said drift yourself." "Drift is tenths over hours," Gina replied. "This is 2 full points in minutes with matching conductivity rise. That is not sensor mood. That is chemistry." She clipped a second strip, watched it turn deep indigo, and sealed both samples in labeled bags from her kit. She wrote the time and location in block letters. Building C basement trench port. 2, 547-23, 547-41. Chain of custody mattered when memories got edited later. Derek watched her write and gave a tight smile, the kind managers used when they wanted the room to see confidence, even when they did not have certainty. "You're building a courtroom," he said. "I'm building a record," she answered. Same thing when somebody ignores a hardwired high. She stepped to Pump B's local monitor and pulled vibration trend. The graph was jagged, not sinusoidal. Repeated spikes between 11 and 14 millimeters per second, then brief drops, then spikes again. Pump B's normal band lived under 4.5. Above 10, service guidance said, "Inspect immediately for cavitation or suction starvation." She pressed the casing with the back of her glove and felt stutter pulses through steel, uneven and hollow. The sound came in bursts, like gravel in a pipe. Milo shifted closer despite himself. "Is that bearing failure?" "Not yet," Gina said. "This pattern is vapor pockets collapsing at the impeller. Cavitation eats metal fast, but right now it tells us suction conditions are unstable. Something upstream is pulsing pressure back into the sump path." Derek folded his arms. "Or it tells us an old pump sounds old." Gina did not look at him. She pointed at the trend overlay. "See this interval? 4 seconds high, 3 seconds moderate, then a hard spike. That's not age noise. That is check valve chatter. That is, the disk is slamming under reverse flow and reopening under surge. Every cycle sends a slug where it does not belong." She crouched at the clear return spool and angled her flashlight through the fluid. Froth streaks moved in bands, then cleared, then reappeared in the same rhythm as the vibration spikes. She counted out loud so Milo could map sound to flow. 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1004. Spike, reset, again. If you can count it, it's mechanical, not random. The horn pulsed. The red beacon bounced off wet concrete and painted all 3 of them in warning color for half a second at a time. Gina rose and walked to the interlock cabinet on the wall beside the sump panel. The bypass key sat in the enable slot. Turn to maintain acknowledge mode. Amber lamp lit. That position was supposed to be used only during validated troubleshooting with permit signatures and a safety watch. No permit tag hung from the key ring. She held up her tablet and photographed the key position, the empty permit clip, and the time banner in one frame. Then she opened the cabinet door and read off terminal indicators. High input active, auto shutdown relay armed, but bypassed at operator acknowledge. This is exactly what I warned about in the deferral memo. Milo looked from the cabinet to Derek. There was a deferral memo? Derek cut in, voice clipped. There are 20 memos a week. We prioritize. Gina scrolled her tablet and pulled the work order history anyway, forcing the issue into the open air. WO-3C-1179. 19 days ago. Corroded check valve on line 3 return, body pitting at seat. Leak by confirmed under pressure test. Requested replacement and 6-hour shutdown window. Deferred by operations. She turned the screen toward Milo first, then Derek. Your approval code is on line 7. Derek did not read it. We deferred because production had to run. Production still has to run after today, Gina said. If the backflow path opens fully, this basement becomes the pressure relief point. She moved to the level transmitter display for the trench. The numeric value advanced in stair steps. 41%, hold. 44, hold. 48. Stair step rise matched slug inflow. A clean leak would trend like a slope. Pulsed backflow looked like this. Packets stacked on packets. Gina drew a quick line with her finger across the screen for Milo. Think of it like a heartbeat in reverse. Each pulse is line 3 coughing into our sump. The pumps can keep up with a leak. They cannot keep up with surges if one unit is cavitating. Milo swallowed, then asked the practical question. Combined rating is 2,100 gallons per minute, right? On paper, Gina said. That number assumes clean suction, stable head, no vapor, no foam, no debris. Pump B is unstable. Effective capacity is already down. If inflow crosses that reduced capacity, level climbs no matter how loud we yell. She turned and pointed at the emergency containment pit indicator. The pit sat at 22%, unusual for that hour. Secondary pit is taking bleed it should not be seeing. That means this has been feeding longer than this shift. We are late to our own warning. Derek checked his watch, then his phone. The body language of a man measuring minutes against bonuses. You've made your speech. We need transfer. Gina walked to the stairwell side where a stainless junction box fed the pH probe circuit. Condensation should have been absent. Instead, thin droplets beaded along the lower seam, and the cable jacket showed whitening near the gland. The chalky look insulation got after caustic exposure. She touched the surface with pH paper. It went blue as quickly as the trench sample. She lifted her voice. Chemical aerosol is already in this room. Cable jackets are degrading. Once insulation softens, arc fault risk in MCC2 goes up. Milo glanced toward the motor control center enclosure behind protective screens. So if it reaches the trays? It won't ask permission, Gina said. Caustic tracks downhill. Cable trays are downhill. Derek exhaled sharply. Enough catastrophe theater. Gina pointed to the floor drain lit by the east wall. A thin, clear stream slipped over it, almost invisible under fluorescent glare, but it left a matte trail on paint where finish had dulled from alkali. That isn't theater, that is active migration. We isolate now, or we chase this through 3 bays. She keyed her radio again. Control Dixon, request immediate lockout on line 3 transfer pumps and dispatch maintenance with valve crew to check CV3R seat integrity. Repeat, lockout request. Control replied after a short pause, voice tight. Dixon, operations has not authorized lockout. Derek answered into his own radio before she could speak. Control, hold lockout. We're evaluating local. The basement fans pushed humid air in slow circles, carrying that stripped clean odor deeper into her mask. Gina could feel the pressure of seconds now, not abstract, but mechanical. Each pulse at the return spool, each level step on the transmitter. She moved to the manual sight tube on the trench wall and wiped condensate with her sleeve. The fluid line sat higher than the digital readout by nearly 3 inches, meaning the transmitter was lagging under foam conditions. She called it out immediately. Instrument lag, actual level above indicated. Foam is damping transmitter response. Adjust your mental margin down now. Milo's composure slipped. How far down? Maybe 2 minutes, Gina said. Maybe less if surge amplitude increases. Derek shook his head as if refusing the premise could erase it. You cannot run a plant on maybe. You cannot run it on denial, she said. She opened her handheld vibration analyzer app and clipped the sensor magnet to pump B casing for a live FFT scan. Peaks rose at vein pass frequency, with sidebands that matched recirculation instability. She rotated the screen toward Milo. This is the fingerprint. Hydraulics are breaking down. Pump B is close to losing prime under these pulses. Derek stepped closer, invaded her working space, and lowered his voice. You're done dramatizing. Step away from the controls. She did not step away. She reached for the laminated capacity chart mounted beside the panel and tapped the row for current configuration. 1 stable pump, plus 1 degraded pump with gas entrainment. Net sustainable drawdown in that condition was less than half nominal. She tapped the inflow estimate she had written from surge interval counts. Inflow estimate right now is between 1,300 and 1,700 gallons per minute, pulsed. If pump B drops out, we can only move around 900 with pump A in this trench geometry. That is a losing equation. Milo stared at the numbers. So level keeps rising even if A runs perfect. Correct. The horn cycled again, longer this time, as if sound itself had weight. Gina felt the moral geometry of the room settle into place. 1 person counting signals, 1 person counting output, 1 person trying to decide which count kept him employed. She reached into her vest and pulled the red hazard tags she carried for field isolation. 1 by 1, she fixed them to the bypass key, to the panel handle, and to the local pump B start station. Out of service. Safety hold. Authorized by G. Dixon, 549. Derek ripped the tag from the start station and crumpled it. Not authorized. Gina took a breath through her mask, then spoke with deliberate clarity so control, logs, and witnesses would all capture the same sentence. I am identifying active high sump hazard with confirmed caustic ingress, bypassed interlock and unstable pump B cavitation, check valve chatter signature, transmitter lag, and ongoing trench level rise. This unit is unsafe for continued line 3 charging. Control stayed silent for 2 seconds, that felt longer than the horn cycle, then answered. Statement copied. A deep metallic knock rolled through the piping from above, 1 heavy strike followed by 2 lighter taps. The unmistakable sound of a valve disc hitting seat under reverse force. Milo flinched. Gina did not. She had been waiting for that sound since the first vibration spike. She pointed toward the ceiling pipe rack, where line 3 disappeared toward tank farm. That was the check valve slamming, she said. Next step is either isolation or full backflow event. Derek looked at her, then at the panel, then at the staircase, as if searching for a version of the morning where he could keep both throughput and plausible deniability. The beacon flashed again across his face, turning his expression into hard planes and brief shadows. Gina watched the level tick upward another stair step, while the horn continued its relentless pulse, each cycle announcing the same technical truth, in language nobody could bargain with. The level ticked upward another stair step, while the horn continued its relentless pulse, each cycle announcing the same technical truth, in language nobody could bargain with. Gina turned to the manual isolation cabinet, pulled the clear cover, and set her hand on the red handle for Lean 3 local cutoff. Derek moved fast for once and blocked her forearm with his palm. "Do not touch that valve," he said. "You cut this batch and you answer for every minute." She pulled her arm back, not abrupt, controlled. "If I don't cut this line, we answer for 3 flooded bays and a dead MCC. The mechanism is already here." "You keep saying mechanism like it's a magic word." "It is not magic," she said. "It is sequence. Check valve leak." By became chatter. Chatter became reverse pulses. Reverse pulses are feeding caustic into a trench built for neutral rinse. Pump B is cavitating, so net removal is dropping. Level is climbing in steps because inflow is slugged. If transfer continues, we lose control margin, and then we lose containment. Derek pointed at the panel. Panel says, alarms and warnings every day. We run through alarms every day. Gina shook her head once. Not this alarm in this state. High, plus bypass key, plus confirmed pH above 12, is not a nuisance trip. It is a safeguard defeat with active chemical ingress. Milo stood beside the operator chair, frozen between them. He looked at the level display, then at the trench, then back to Gina's analyzer screen as if hoping one of them would start making less sense so he could decide. The horn screamed again. Pump B gave a hollow grinding growl and then recovered to rough vibration. At 550, Gina keyed her radio and aimed for precision. "Control Dixon." Repeating recommendation. "Isolate line 3 locally now. We have 3 independent indicators of backflow and 1 degrading sump train. Request duty engineer review on open channel." Control answered with careful neutrality. "Dixon, duty engineer is in transit from admin corridor. ETA 4 minutes. Derek snatched his own radio. "No isolation until I approve. Control, hold any stop command." Gina spoke over him without raising volume. "Control, log that operations denied local isolation recommendation after mechanism briefing." "Logged," Control said. Derek turned back to her. "You think logs protect you?" "They protect facts," she said. "Facts are all that stand up after a room like this gets quiet." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "You are not shutting down my line because of a trend graph and a hunch." She pointed at the sight tube and then at the transmitter. "That is not a hunch. Visual level is above instrument by 3 inches. Foam lag. We have false comfort in the number on your screen. This room is filling faster than your data shows." He folded his arms as if settling a debate. "Then run both pumps harder." Gina gave him a look that was almost pity, then moved to the duplex control panel and tapped the status lamps. Pump A is already at full speed command. Pump B is losing suction stability. You cannot command a cavitating pump into competence. You can only reduce the condition causing cavitation. She opened the laminated P&ID print she kept in her kit, spread it against the panel door, and traced the route with a gloved finger so Milo could follow every line. Here is Tank Farm Line 3 discharge. Here is CV3R check valve, the one with deferred replacement. Here is return branch to this basement trench. During normal operation, flow direction keeps this branch quiet. When the check valve leaks under surge, pressure reflects backward. The branch sees pulses. Pulses hit trench. Sump catches it if inflow is low. We are no longer low. Milo leaned in. If we isolate here, does it protect upstream pumps? It protects this basement first. Upstream sees shutdown signal and ramps down. That is what interlock was designed to do until the bypass key defeated it. Derek tapped the paper hard enough to leave a wet fingerprint. You are not briefing him into mutiny. I am briefing him into survival, Gina said. The metallic slap sounded again through the pipe rack, louder now. A second later, froth surged through the return spool in a thick burst, then thinned. The level display jumped from 48 to 53 in one refresh cycle. Even Derek saw that one. He looked at the number, then immediately at his watch, then back to her. Temporary spike, he said. We ride it out. Ride it out to where? Gina asked. At 65%, the west trench lip overtops to cable corridor. At 72, we lose dry footing near MCC2. At 80, we trigger evacuation, and you still get your shutdown, just with ambulances and citations attached. Derek looked past her toward the stairs, calculating who might hear. Watch your tone. My tone is procedural, she said. I am giving explicit hazard thresholds in advance, so no one can claim surprise. She walked to the wall phone, hit speaker, and called maintenance dispatch directly. Dispatch, this is Dixon in C basement. Need immediate valve tech for CV3R confirmation and local blind kit standby. Dispatch came back confused. We were told no mechanical intervention, production priority. Who told you that? Gina asked. A pause. Operations desk. Derek spoke toward the phone. Correct. Stand down. Gina ended the call and faced him squarely. You just canceled the only crew that could verify seat failure before escalation. That decision is now in 2 logs. He smiled thinly. You collecting exhibits again? Collecting causes, she said. The horn cycled. Moisture hissed on a motor casing across the bay. Not visible spray yet, but a faint sizzling at a seam where condensate mixed with caustic mist. Gina smelled the sharper note at once. She pointed with 2 fingers. Aerosol deposition is increasing. We need respirator upgrade in this room if transfer continues. Derek threw his hands up. Now we're evacuating for smell. Not smell, she answered. Corrosive particulate. You see whitening on cable jackets already. She crossed to the east conduit run and scraped a fingernail across the jacket surface. A chalky residue came off in a thin line. She held it up under the light. That is sodium hydroxide attack. Insulation embrittles, then cracks, then moisture intrusion finds conductor. Arc fault does the rest, Milo whispered almost to himself. That can trip the whole motor room. Yes, Gina said, and if it trips under load, restart sequence becomes a separate emergency. Derek pointed at the operator chair. Milo, sit down. Milo did not sit. Gina caught his hesitation and gave him one more clear path. You can request written order with hazard acknowledgement. Company policy allows that. Derek snapped. Policy allows me to assign tasks. Sit. Milo looked at Gina. She held his gaze and kept her voice level. If you take that chair, do it with full understanding. Alarm silence is not correction. Bypass is not control. It only delays the siren while chemistry keeps moving. Derek laughed once, short and harsh. Listen to this. You'd think she built the plant. Gina turned back to the panel and pressed acknowledge just long enough to view stacked event lines, then released it so the horn returned full volume. The history scrolled. ACK, 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 each with operator code, each under maintenance mode. She photographed the full list. 3 overnight suppressions. No corrective work order closure, no permit attached. This pattern is systemic, not sudden. Derek leaned in, voice low. You done grandstanding? She met him without blinking. I am done asking. I am issuing final field warning. Isolate line 3 immediately or this basement will flood with caustic. For a second, nobody spoke. The pump noise filled the gap, rough and uneven. The trench made a low rolling sound now, fluid striking metal in pulses strong enough to echo under the grates. Gina felt the vibration in her shins and knew the window was shrinking from minutes to moments. Derek straightened his jacket and made his choice, with deliberate calm. The tone of a man signing a form he expected someone else to carry. No isolation. We continue transfer. She answered in the same calm. Then I will not operate this system. He nodded as if he had been waiting for exactly that sentence. Good. Then we're at the next step. He turned to Milo and pointed at the chair again. You are primary operator for line 3 effective now. Follow my instructions only. Milo finally sat, stiff-backed, both hands hovering above the controls instead of resting on them. The red beacon flashed over his helmet and turned his face, the color of warning paint. Gina stepped back 1 pace to clear the station and opened the Notes app on her tablet. She read as she typed, making every word audible for the record. Technician Dixon removed from operational control after refusal to execute bypassed high-high transfer. Replacement operator assigned by operations manager under active alarm condition. Time 5:52:14. Witness present. Control spoke through her radio quieter than before. Dixon. Statement received. Derek heard it and snapped his head toward her. Put that away and leave the bay. I will clear the immediate control perimeter, she said, but I am staying as safety observer under objection until duty engineer arrives. You don't assign yourself anything. Policy does when refusal is active, she said. Section 9.2, subsection C. His expression hardened. You really want to make this about policy? It already is about policy, she replied. And hydraulics. He moved right up to her close enough that she could smell coffee and aftershave over caustic air. You are done here by lunch if this line runs clean. She did not step back. If this line ran clean, that horn would not be screaming. He raised his radio. Security, stand by for escort in Building C basement. Non-compliant tech obstructing operations. Gina keyed in immediately after him. Control note retaliatory security request made after documented safety refusal. No physical obstruction by technician. I am standing clear of controls. Control hesitated, then answered. Noted. 3 days earlier, she had reviewed the revised refusal policy in a toolbox talk that half the room treated like legal wallpaper. Now each sentence from that document became practical equipment. She moved to the doorway exactly outside the taped operator zone and planted her boots there. From that angle, she could see the panel, the trench site tube, pump B casing, and Milo's hands. Derek gestured at the silence function. If it chirps, Hold it down. Milo nodded once, shallow. Gina spoke to him, not loud but precise enough to cut through horn and pump noise. Do not confuse silence with safety. Watch level, watch suction, watch your feet. If I call kill, hit stop immediately. Derek barked. You don't command him. She answered without looking away from Milo. Physics does. The door at the top landing opened and 2 unit operators appeared, drawn by the horn and radio traffic. They stayed on the stairs, eyes tracking from Derek's rigid posture to Gina's note screen to the panel lights. Nobody joked. Nobody asked for context. The room itself had become context. Derek saw the audience and raised his voice for them. Let the record show. She refused to do her job. Gina lifted her tablet and read from the fresh entry. Let the record show I refused an unsafe directive, cited mechanism, requested isolation, requested maintenance verification, and remained clear of controls after reassignment. He scoffed. You think fancy wording saves you? No, she said. Correct wording saves the people you're putting in this room. Milo flinched as Pump B gave another hard shudder. On the panel, suction pressure dipped, recovered, dipped again. The level display climbed to 57. The sight tube showed higher. Gina checked her watch and spoke to nobody in particular. A field calculation turned into a warning line. At current rise rate with this pulse amplitude, trench lip in under 6 minutes. Derek pointed at her. Stop narrating and get out. She kept her eyes on the process. I am not interfering. I am documenting. He stepped toward the stairs and shouted up, Where's security? No answer came yet, only the whine of fans and the horn's unbroken pulse. Milo's right thumb hovered over alarm silence. Derek stood at his shoulder like a foreman over a timer. Gina remained at the doorway, with her analyzer in one hand and radio in the other, every muscle tight but deliberate, refusing the order, refusing the panic, refusing to let the mechanism pass unspoken while the level kept climbing, and the room edged from argument into consequence. Milo pressed Start Transfer with his left index finger, while his right thumb rested on the alarm silence key, and Gina felt the room cross a line no procedure could uncross. The pump command light for line 3 went from amber standby to solid green. Up in the rack, a relay snapped, then another. The horn dropped to a muted chirp under Milo's thumb, not gone, only throttled, a warning forced to whisper. Derek watched the panel like a trader watching a market tick and said, There, normal operation, keep it steady. Gina checked her watch, 5:52:44. She keyed her radio without taking her eyes off the sight tube. Control document transfer initiated under protest with high active and bypass engaged. Control answered immediately, voice tight. Documented. The first 30 seconds looked almost stable, which was the most dangerous phase of bad decisions. Line pressure climbed from 62 pounds per square inch to 68. Pump A held tone. Pump B still carried that hollow growl. The trench level paused at 57 on the lagging transmitter, but the manual tube showed fluid licking higher against the mark tape she had set. She held her analyzer near Pump B casing. Vibration rose in quick spikes, then settled, then spiked harder. Derek heard the spikes and pretended he did not. See, flow is back. We're recovering. Gina answered without looking at him. No, we're loading the fault. By 5:53, 2 more operators had moved down 3 steps from the landing, close enough to hear commands, far enough to claim they were not in the bay. Security still had not appeared. Duty engineer still had not appeared. The people physically present were Derek, Milo, Gina, and a system that was already giving all the testimony required. Control broke in over radio a moment later. Update. Duty engineer delayed at South Access for PPE staging and respirator clearance. Revised ETA 558. Pressure went 71, 75, 79. The return spool flashed with froth bands in the same pulse cadence she had counted earlier, only tighter now, every 3 seconds instead of 4. Pump B vibration crossed 15 millimeters per second. Milo glanced back once. "It's loud. It's unstable," Gina said. "Watch suction." Derek cut in. "Watch your set point. Keep transfer up." Milo swallowed and held silence on another chirp. The horn's reduced tone stuttered like an alarm under a pillow. Gina had heard that sound in one training module titled Human Factors in Preventable Losses. The module's point was simple. People did not ignore danger when it screamed. They ignored it after they learned how to soften it. At plus 90 seconds from restart, the trench gave a deeper rolling knock under the grate. Not splash, not routine turbulence, but slug impact. Gina stepped one pace closer to the doorway threshold and lifted her meter probe into the thin mist forming near the east conduit run. Caustic aerosol concentration climbed above local action level. She transmitted again. Control airborne caustic indicator elevated in C basement. Recommend immediate respirator escalation and area restriction. Control replied, "Copy, notifying EHS." Derek snapped toward her. "Stop broadcasting panic." She met him with flat certainty. "I'm broadcasting data." At 5:54:31, line pressure touched 83 pounds per square inch, dipped to 78, then jumped to 86 in a single second. The jump synchronized with a metallic clap from overhead, a valve disc striking and rebounding. Milo flinched, lost full pressure on the silence key, and the horn surged to full volume for one clean, brutal pulse before he mashed it down again. That one pulse pulled the two operators on the stairs another step backward. Gina called it as it happened, because naming sequence was the only leverage she had left. Check valve chatter accelerating. Surge amplitude increasing. We are near seat failure. Derek pointed to the green transfer lamp as if it were a moral argument. We are making rate. Stay in your lane. My lane is keeping people out of chemical water, she said. Pressure reached 89 pounds per square inch at 5:55 and 2 seconds and began oscillating between high 80s and low 70s with a violent rhythm. Pump B tone broke into a ragged rattle. Then came a sharp metallic slap, louder than the earlier knocks, followed by a low, continuous roar from beneath the trench grating, where no continuous roar should ever exist. Gina did not need a second sample. She knew the sound of sustained reverse flow entering a confined channel. She shouted, "Milo, stop transfer now!" Derek overrode her in the same breath. "Hold it, it'll clear." Milo's hand hovered above stop, then froze between voices. Gina keyed radio and spoke each word like it was being carved in steel. Control active backflow event confirmed by acoustic and pressure signature. Commanding emergency stop recommendation on line 3. Control came back. Operations has not released stop. Then log refusal, Gina said. Logged. The trench level display hit 61. The sight tube was already above 64 equivalent. Foam rode the surface in thick white mats, and Pump A intake began to snarl as debris and froth crossed the suction path. On the Pump B status light, Suction fault blinked once, cleared, blinked twice, then held. Gina counted under her breath from habit, not hope. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. At plus 412 from restart, Pump B lost prime completely. The tone vanished for half a second, then returned as a high, dry whine with almost no hydraulic load. Pump A still commanded hard, dead-headed intermittently against foam pockets and entrained gas, motor current spiking without matching drawdown. The level started climbing in visible increments now, not just on instruments. Fluid pushed up through grate seams and spread across the first bay floor in fast, thin sheets. "Kill line 3 now," Gina yelled. Full voice, no radio. Derek looked at Milo, then at his watch, then at the panel trend as if one more data point might rescue his bonus math. "Wait, give it a few seconds." Those seconds became the hinge. 1, 2, 3. Gina moved toward the local cutoff again. Derek stepped in front of the handle and threw his shoulder across the cabinet door. 4, 5. She tried to angle past him. He blocked with both hands open, not striking, just obstructing. 6, 7, 8. Then the system chose for them. A crack like a steel bat against a drum echoed through the rack, and CV3R failed full open. The pressure oscillation flattened into a single hard surge. Caustic mix sheeted through the return branch and slammed into the trench with enough force to throw white spray 2 meters high. It hit cable trays along the east wall in a fan pattern, ran down ladder rungs, and started dripping from every low point at once. In MCC2, 3 arc fault breakers popped in rapid sequence. Bang, 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 followed by darkness on the right side motor row and a shrill electrical alarm layered over the muffled Sump chirp. Workers on the stairs shouted and retreated upward. Milo shoved his chair back so fast it tipped. Derek finally barked, "Stop! Stop transfer!" Milo hit stop, but upstream inertia kept feeding for critical seconds while valves began to travel. Gina grabbed her radio. "Emergency in Building C basement. Caustic release active. Electrical faults at MCC2. Initiate hazmat response. Isolate power to non-essential bays." Control did not hesitate this time. "Emergency response activated. Evacuate non-essential personnel immediately." White vapor formed where hot motor housings met caustic spray. Not fire smoke, but dense alkaline mist that turned the air opaque in pockets. Gina pulled her mask seal tighter and pointed up the stairs. "Move. Everybody up and out." One of the stair operators obeyed instantly. The other tried to keep footing on the wet second step, slipped, and caught the rail hard, wrenching his wrist with an audible cry. Gina saw the deforming angle and knew it was fractured. She keyed in the injury while guiding him upward with her free hand on his shoulder blade. One fall injury, likely wrist fracture. Conscious ambulatory with assistance. By 5:56, the first bay was knee-deep. Caustic water moved with deceptive smoothness over painted concrete, carrying insulation fragments, zip ties, and gray foam islands torn from old seals. The emergency containment berm at bay, one held for less than a minute before overtopping at the corner joint, where prior patch compound had shrunk. Once that lip went under, flow found the channel to Bay 2 and accelerated. Derek coughed into his sleeve, eyes watering, and kept saying, "Get pumps back, get pumps back," as if the same commands that had built the failure could reverse it. Gina grabbed his jacket sleeve and hauled him toward the stairs. "You can't outcommand chemistry. Move." He resisted for one heartbeat, staring at the panel, then stumbled after her when another breaker popped and the overhead lights flickered to emergency strips. Red exit bars and beacon reflections turned the room into intermittent color. White mist, red flash, gray concrete, red flash again. Behind them, Pump A tripped on overload, and the last organized drawdown ended. At plus 6 minutes from restart, Bay 1 was thigh-deep, and Bay 2 was climbing past boot tops. Two mechanics, who had entered from the west door for valve response, reached the shower corridor coughing hard from inhalation exposure. Gina intercepted them at the threshold, forced both under emergency drench pull stations, and held one man upright when his legs buckled on the wet tile. "Breathe slow, eyes open, stay in the water," she ordered. Chest response team took over 30 seconds later with portable air and neutral rinse protocols. The roar from below shifted from impact to volume, broad and relentless. Gravity took over. Without functioning sump removal and with upstream residual still draining, the basement became a catch basin for a transfer line that had no reason to stop quickly. Fluid wrapped around stair supports and swirled in eddies where cable conduits entered walls, chewing paint to dull patches within minutes. The chemical lake spread across all 3 pump bays, reflecting alarm lights in a hard, bright shimmer that looked almost clean until it touched anything organic. At 5:58, duty engineer Priya Nanda arrived at the upper landing in full respirator. One look at the level and panel status enough to end argument culture for the morning. "Who authorized bypass under active high-high?" she demanded. Nobody answered immediately. Gina raised her hand once, not as confession, as witness marker. Bypass was already in place before restart. Operations ordered transfer continuation over refusal. Priya nodded sharply. "Control, this is Nanda. Declare Level 2 internal hazardous material incident. Lockout Line 3 upstream, close farm header isolation. Cut all basement electrical feeds except emergency egress, and start external notification tree now." Control. Executing. That order finally aligned plant hierarchy with physical reality, but consequences were already moving beyond the room. Compliance mirrors had captured the alarm suppressions. Environmental telemetry had flagged pH drift for prior nights. Now live incident data, injury reports, and breaker trip logs were joining the same evidence chain in real time. The legal perimeter around Derek's decisions tightened with every automatic timestamp. By 6:01, responders had established hot, warm, and cold zones around Building C. Gina stood in warm zone decon spray, watching basement camera feeds on a tablet held by EHS. The view showed fluid at waist height in Bay 1, still rising in Bay 3 where floor slope trapped volume. The estimate from Flow Balance updated every minute. 18,000 gallons released, then 24,500, then 31,200. When it crossed 40,000 shortly after 6:10, nobody in command disputed the number. The mass was visible on screen, mapped against bay dimensions everyone knew by memory. Milo sat on a bench wrapped in a foil blanket, shivering though the morning was warm, repeating, "He told me hold silence, he told me hold silence," until the medic grounded him with eye contact and slow count breathing. Derek stood 10 feet away with decon water running off his cuffs, trying to call 3 different executives in sequence. None answered on the first attempt. At 6:11, the same minute Derek had once promised would still be normal production, Building C basement was a contained disaster scene with electrical isolation, medical triage, and a chemical inventory reconciliation in progress. Gina watched the feed as floating debris, bumped against a submerged panel door where her red hazard tag had been torn off earlier. She felt no triumph, only a hard, exhausted clarity. She had warned on mechanism, thresholds, and sequence. The system had followed sequence anyway. Priya stepped beside her, voice low but carrying command. Dixon, I need your timeline from 542 forward verbatim where you can. Gina nodded and handed over her tablet with photos, logs, and audio snippets already indexed by time. Start with the bypass key photo at 545, then the pH samples, then pressure oscillation, and the slap at 555. Priya scanned the first entries, jaw tightening as the pattern emerged in clean, unemotional data. This will hold. Gina looked back at the monitor where white mist still drifted above the chemical surface, and answered with the only verdict that mattered in that moment. It would have held better if he had listened at 546. Priya did not argue with that. She handed the tablet back, pointed Gina toward the temporary command table in the corridor, and said, "Stay with me. We build the timeline while memory is hot." Gina followed, decon water still dripping from her sleeves, mask hanging loose at her neck, throat raw from alkaline air. Behind them, the basement camera feed kept running on a wall monitor. 3 bays of pale, reflective liquid, broken only by conduit shadows, and the occasional floating scrap of insulation. The horn had finally gone silent. The silence was worse. By 6:14, the corridor outside Building C had become an incident control lane. EHS taped zone boundaries across the floor. Maintenance rolled in portable barriers, and medical staff moved the 2 inhalation-exposed mechanics toward oxygen support. The stair operator with the fractured wrist sat upright on a cot, face tight, arm immobilized in a temporary splint, while a medic checked circulation at his fingertips. Nobody shouted now. The arguments had burned off. In their place came clipped checklists, signatures, and names spoken for accountability. Priya opened an incident board app and started with the non-negotiables. Release medium. Caustic transfer mix, sodium hydroxide dominant, Gina said. Estimated volume. 40,000 gallons crossed by 0610 estimate from trench fill geometry plus residual line drain. Source mechanism. CV3 R-check valve failure after documented chatter under surge. High safeguard bypassed during transfer. Priya looked up. State that again with timing. Gina did, exact and flat. At 5:46, I filed refusal and safety objection. At 5:52:44, transfer restarted under bypass. At plus 412 from restart, pump B lost prime. 8-second delay on kill command. Then full open check valve failure and uncontrolled backflow. Priya entered each line, then called control on speaker so the room could hear. Freeze all digital logs for Building C from 48 hours pre-incident to present. No overwrite, no routine purge, no user edits. Legal hold effective now. Control answered immediately. Legal hold flag set. Mirror copies pushed to compliance vault and off-site archive. That single reply changed the atmosphere around Derek more than any accusation had. He stood near the outer tape line in borrowed coveralls, wet cuffs dark against the concrete, trying to look useful while avoiding Gina's direction. He'd stopped making calls and started reading his own phone screen with quick thumb flicks, searching for some instruction that would put hierarchy back in his favor. It did not come. At 6:22, the first external notification went out to the county hazardous material desk. Priya gave the report herself. Chemical type, approximate quantity, containment status, injuries, and stormwater risk controls in place. Gina listened for one detail she cared about most: off-site migration. The county responder asked the question directly. Any confirmed discharge beyond secondary containment? Priya answered, no confirmed off-site release at this time. We have elevated pH indicators in internal monitoring and prior unexplained well drift now under review. Sampling teams deployed. Gina filed that sentence away. Prior well drift had moved from anomaly to evidence. By 6:30, finance had joined via secure line, because big incidents always became arithmetic before sunrise ended. Plant controller Naomi Velas asked for a first-pass damage envelope. Priya put the call on speaker and nodded to Gina. She did not like estimating loss while people were still coughing in triage, but she did it because bad estimates created bad decisions. Direct electrical and controls impact, Gina began, reading from the bay map. MCC2 right row compromised, motor starters and contactors exposed to caustic, conduit insulation attack along East Run, 3 Sump Bay local panels submerged. Replace, not clean. Mechanical. Pump B likely major rebuild or scrap, depending on impeller and seal housing condition. Pump A overload trip with possible motor damage. Cabling in tray sections 1 through 4 should be treated as non-recoverable. Decon and neutralization for basement concrete and drains will be multi-day. Naomi asked, range? Priya answered before Gina could soften it. Initial direct damage estimate 7 to 9 million. Naomi went quiet for 2 beats, then said, understood. We are opening catastrophe code. Derek stepped closer to the table and said, that's inflated. We don't know final condition. Priya did not even turn. You can submit your own estimate through Incident Command in writing. He stopped speaking. 3 minutes later, HR arrived with 2 laptops and 1 security supervisor, not to stage a spectacle, but to formalize witness capture before stories drifted. Gina gave her statement in sequence while an HR specialist typed. No adjectives, no speculation, only mechanics and directives. She identified each witness present at key moments. Milo at the station, 2 stair operators, control logs, dispatch call, bypass key photo, pH samples bagged at 0547 with labels intact. When asked if she touched the transfer start controls after refusal, she answered, no. I remained outside taped operator zone and acted as safety observer under policy. The security supervisor asked one question that mattered for legal framing. Was there physical obstruction to your refusal rights? Yes, Gina said. I was removed from control authority assignment. I was not removed from the area until emergency escalation. I was threatened with site removal before lunch for refusing unsafe operation. He looked up. Direct quote? She gave him Derek's line exactly. By 6:48, Milo gave his own statement in a separate room with a steward present. He emerged pale, eyes swollen from stress and decon rinse, and sat on a crate outside warm zone with a paper cup he never drank. Gina walked over, kept a respectful distance, and said, You told the truth? He nodded once. I said he told me to hold alarm silence if it chirped. I said you warned us about check valve chatter and surge. He stared at the cup. I should have hit stop sooner. Gina answered in a low voice. You were put in a bad position. Own your seconds, not his decisions. At 7:05, the insurer's emergency adjuster joined by video, tie loosened, eyes sharp, with the practiced skepticism of somebody who had seen every version of unexpected incident. He asked for 3 categories at once: condition of safeguards, pre-incident maintenance status, and whether any interlocks had been intentionally defeated. Priya shared a still image from Gina's 545 cabinet photo. Bypass key in maintain acknowledge, no permit tag. Then she shared the alarm history showing repeated acknowledgments overnight without corrective closure. The adjuster did not react visibly, but his tone shifted. "We're issuing preliminary reservation of rights pending full review," he said. "Coverage may be limited if willful safeguard defeat is substantiated." Naomi, still on finance line, closed her eyes briefly and pinched the bridge of her nose. Limited coverage on an event that size meant losses would hit operating cash and contracts, not just insurance. Derek opened his mouth, then stopped when Priya raised one hand for silence. At 7:12, environmental sampling came in from the internal stormwater monitoring well. pH was off-spec high, not catastrophic, but outside permit envelope. The technician delivering the result sounded almost apologetic, as if numbers could be softened by tone. They could not. Priya entered it into the incident log and placed a mandatory regulator update call within 5 minutes, exactly by protocol. The call back from the agency arrived at 7:27 with direct instructions: preserve all telemetry, submit 30-day pre-incident trend data, and prepare for formal inspection with potential enforcement review. Derek tried one more maneuver. "We should wait for full lab confirmation before using words like enforcement." Priya finally looked at him, expression controlled and final. "No, we use accurate words at accurate times. Off-spec is off-spec. Bypass is bypass." By mid-morning, the practical shape of the shutdown came into focus. Decon contractors estimated 48 hours just to neutralize standing liquid and verify floor pH safe for electrical entry. Electrical engineering projected 10 to 14 days to replace damaged starters, cable runs, and control cabinets if parts were available. Procurement checked lead times and found 2 critical components on 12-day delivery at best. Operations modeling added startup testing windows and permit revalidation, and the number widened again. Priya wrote the projection in black marker on the whiteboard where everyone could see it. See basement/line 3. Full return to service. 19 to 24 days estimate. Naomi asked from the speaker, "Can we isolate the impact to one line and keep customer commitments?" Process engineering answered, "Not fully. Line 3 loss cuts. Transfer flexibility across 2 products. We can cover part with overtime and reroute, but contract exposure remains." The financial consequence stopped being abstract right there. A contract manager sent the first notice draft at 9:03. Delivery risk on 3 standing orders. Penalty clauses potentially triggered after day 7. Naomi requested legal review before sending. But the reputational damage clock had started even before the emails left. Through all of it, Gina kept returning to one table at the edge of command where evidence bags sat in a gray crate. 2 pH strips, 2 vial samples, 1 printed alarm history, 1 photographed bypass key position, 1 tag she had placed, and Derek had torn from the start station then dropped. She almost missed that last one until a custodian found it near the stair drain and handed it to EHS with gloves on. The tag had a crease through her initials, but the timestamp remained legible. Collected, logged, preserved. At 10:20, corporate compliance called in from headquarters. They did not ask broad questions. They asked narrow ones that meant they had already reviewed mirrored logs. Who authorized maintain acknowledge mode outside permitted work? Why were 3 overnight acknowledgements closed with no corrective action? Who instructed restart after documented refusal? Priya answered where she had records. Where she did not, she said, pending witness confirmation. Gina respected that. Precision was the only currency that held value after a preventable incident. The compliance lead ended with one instruction that landed like a gavel. Effective immediately, Derek Mallory is removed from operational authority pending investigation. Badge access to control functions suspended. Security did not dramatize it. They approached Derek, requested his badge, and escorted him to admin for a formal interview. He did not resist. He looked at Gina once as he passed, expression not angry now, only hollowed out by the realization that systems he had treated as obstacles were now the systems writing his consequences. By noon, medical updates came back stable. 1 confirmed wrist fracture, 2 inhalation burns, requiring observation and respiratory treatment. No life-threatening status. That mattered to Gina more than any number on Naomi's board. She sat on an overturned tote in the cold zone for exactly 3 minutes, eyes closed, then stood and returned to Priya's table when called. The day did not pause for relief. At 12:40, legal counsel convened a structured debrief. They mapped exposure in 4 columns: worker safety, environmental compliance, asset damage, and contractual impact. Preliminary totals were brutal but coherent. Direct physical damage sat at $8.7 million. Midpoint projection once equipment replacement quotes firmed. Contract exposure estimates reached $2.4 million if outages extended past 2 weeks. Regulatory penalties were unpriced, but likely significant due to documented safeguard defeat and prior telemetry warning signals. Insurance recovery was now explicitly partial until coverage determination resolved. Counsel asked Gina one final question for the morning record. In your professional judgment, was this failure chain preventable? She answered without heat. Yes. Replace CV3R when first flagged. Remove bypass mode after troubleshooting. Respect high alarm and interlock. Isolate at 0546 when refusal was filed. Any one of those would likely have prevented basin flooding. Priya added. And none were done. The debrief closed at 13:05 with action items assigned and deadlines in hours, not days. As people dispersed, Gina walked once more to the monitor showing Building C basement. Pumps were silent, power isolated, chemical level receding slowly under controlled recovery. It looked less dramatic than the live failure had felt, and that was the dangerous illusion industrial sites always offered. Aftermath looked manageable, so leadership convinced itself risk had been manageable too. Gina knew better. Risk had been obvious. It had simply been overruled. When control requested her for one more verification pass on timestamps, she answered on the first call, voice steady again. The reckoning had started in the same place the failure started. Not with mystery, not with bad luck, but with logged decisions, lined up against physical law, each one measurable, each one attached to a name. At 13:09, Gina was already back at Priya's table when control routed the timestamp verification packet to the incident printer, and the warm paper curled in her gloved hands as she read line by line. Priya stood beside her, cross-checking the mirrored server copy on a tablet. Every critical marker matched. 545 bypass key photo, 546 refusal log, 55244 restart, plus 412 pump prime loss, 5:55 surge slap. Emergency call, injury reports. No gaps, no overwritten fields, no missing operator IDs. Read me the overnight acknowledgments again, Priya said. Gina did. 3 alarms acknowledged in maintain acknowledge mode between 2:11 and 3:04. No permit number attached. No corrective closure note. Priya nodded once. That answers the amber icon question. It was never returned to normal state. At 13:22, corporate legal arrived in person with 2 compliance analysts and a chain of custody case. The lead analyst, Nora Kells, laid out tamper seals and evidence forms on the stainless table, then looked directly at Gina. I need physical item disposition from the gray crate, with collector confirmation. Gina opened the crate and placed each item on absorbent pads in order. 2 sealed pH strips, 2 sealed liquid vials, printed alarm history, laminated photo print of the bypass key position, and the torn red hazard tag recovered near the stair drain. She added her handheld meter export on encrypted drive and the vibration analyzer file set. Nora read each label aloud while a second analyst photographed every transfer. Collector initials GD, timestamp legible, location legible, seal intact. She lifted the torn tag with tweezers. This one? Placed by me at 5:49 on local start station, Gina said. Removed by Derek Mallory. Recovered by facilities at 9:18? Nora sealed it separately. Noted as removed warning device. By 13:41, the county hazardous material desk called back on speaker with confirmed receipt of full incident data. Containment integrity update? The officer asked. Priya answered. No off-site migration confirmed. Internal well was off-spec high pH. We have active neutralization and continuous sampling. The officer replied, Understood. Keep hourly updates until parameters stabilize under permit limits for 2 consecutive readings. Gina wrote that on the board and circled it. External contact closed with ongoing requirement. Documented. At 14:03, the state environmental inspector arrived with 2 field technicians in splash gear. They asked for the prior night telemetry anomaly first, not the dramatic images. Gina walked them to the trend station and brought up the unexplained pH drift from the 2 nights before the flood. The inspector, Lena Ortiz, tapped the graph. This is your delayed warning, Lena said. No visible event, but the system already told you chemistry was crossing boundaries. Gina answered. I flagged possible backflow path when that drift started showing up. Lena glanced at the deferral memo and CV3R work order. An operations deferred replacement 19 days ago. Approved by Derek? Gina said. Lena's expression did not change. Then that decision sits at the center of enforcement. At 14:27, HR called Gina and Milo into conference room 2 for recorded clarification. Milo looked steadier than he had in triage, but he still held his cup with both hands. The HR specialist asked him one direct question. When you were assigned station control, did Ms. Dixon coach you to violate policy? Milo shook his head. No. She told me I could ask for safety review and written order. She warned me alarm silence was not correction. Then he looked at Gina, finally saying what he had stopped short of all morning. On overnight shift handoff, Derek told me, if it chirps, hold silence and keep flow up. I didn't understand what that meant until today. That resolved the loaded half-sentence he had carried since the stairwell. He had known the instruction was wrong before dawn and lacked the authority to challenge it. At 15:02, One of the operators who had winced on the stairs, Carla Mendes, asked to amend her witness statement. She sat upright, hands flat on the table, and spoke with the blunt cadence of someone done protecting hierarchy. I was in C basement at 546 and heard Gina refuse the bypass. I also heard Derek call her lazy and threaten to put her off-site by lunch. At 5:53, I stepped back because I heard the line slap overhead and thought the check valve was hammering. I should have said that on radio. I didn't. Priya told her, "You're saying it now. That matters." The other operator from the early confrontation never amended his account. He submitted the minimum factual statement and left 2 questions unanswered in interview. Legal noted the omissions and moved on. At 16:18, insurer counsel rejoined by video with a coverage determination update. The adjuster's tone was formal and final this time. Based on preserved logs, witness corroboration, and documented safeguard defeat, we are issuing partial denial under the willful disablement exclusion. Emergency response and limited remediation remain covered. Major equipment replacement tied to bypass operation is excluded. Naomi asked, "State the financial split clearly." The adjuster read from his sheet. Estimated reimbursable portion approximately 35% of direct physical loss, pending invoice audit. In practical terms, that meant the company absorbed most of the $8.7 million hit and all reputational leakage from delayed contracts. The dark irony settled over the room without comment. The shortcut meant to save a shift had purchased a quarter-scale financial wound. At 17:06, compliance called final action for the day. Derek's interview transcript, radio captures, and command logs had been matched against mirrored server records. Security escorted him back into conference room 1 for notice delivery. Gina did not see the paperwork, but she heard the clear parts through the open corridor when the door shifted. Termination for cause, effective immediately. Badge privileges revoked. You are not authorized to direct operations, personnel, or records. He answered once, voice thin. I was trying to keep throughput. Compliance replied, you defeated a safety safeguard under active alarm and ignored a documented refusal. Throughput is not a defense. At 17:44, the state safety investigator called Priya with prosecutorial referral language already drafted. We are opening charges under industrial safety statutes for willful safeguard defeat and retaliatory pressure after protected refusal. Priya put it on speaker so legal, HR and EHS all heard the same sentence at the same time. External contact resolved. No ambiguity. By 1820, Gina finally removed her face shield for the last time that day and sat with Priya at the empty command table. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, decon fans humming in the hall. Priya slid one document across to her. Interim assignment order. Pending final hearings, you're reinstated to full authority and appointed lead for hazard authority training redesign. Gina read it once, then again. Training can't be slide decks and signatures. Priya answered, it won't be. You build it from this event. Mechanism first, authority second, ego never. The next morning at 7:10, Lena Ortiz returned with formal notices. OSHA citations were posted by the entry clock before first shift. Willful safeguard defeat. Failure to correct known mechanical defect, retaliation linked to protected safety refusal. Workers stopped, read, and signed acknowledgement one by one. No one joked. At 9:35, lab results for Gina's sealed samples came back and closed the evidence loop. pH, strip, and vial chemistry. confirmed concentrated sodium hydroxide presence in the trench at the exact time she logged, inconsistent with neutral rinse operations. The moisture residue from the east conduit jacket tested strongly alkaline as well, validating her cable attack warning. Distinctive details that had seemed small in the moment were now formal findings. The amber maintenance icon, the chalking insulation, the delayed telemetry drift, the foam-lagged transmitter, the stair-step level rise. Every one of them mapped to the same failure chain. 17 days later, in a hearing room that smelled like paper and floor polish, Gina gave sworn testimony while projected logs ran on a wall screen. Derek sat at the far table with counsel. No radio, no authority voice, no audience to perform for. The board chair asked Gina the final technical question. If shutdown had been executed at 5:46, what was the probable outcome? She answered localized cleanup, valve replacement, no basin flood, no electrical cascade, no inhalation injuries. The chair turned to Derek. Do you dispute the mechanism? He looked at the screen with the bypass key photo and said nothing for several seconds. Then, no. That was the moment Principal moved from argument to record. On the 23rd day after neutralization, rebuild, and inspection sign-off, the basement door reopened under revised permit controls. Priya, Naomi, Lena Ortiz, and half the shift stood in Building C, while maintenance bolted a new steel placard above the sump panel in letters tall enough to read from the stairs. Alarm is a warning, not an opinion. Priya handed Gina a marker and said, You lead the first briefing. Gina faced the crew, including Milo in the second row with a notebook open, and spoke the way she had spoken in the worst minute of the incident. Direct mechanism, direct thresholds, direct accountability. If you see red and hear high, you do not negotiate with it. You isolate, verify, and document. If someone outranks you and tells you to defeat a safeguard, refusal is not disloyalty. It is the job. Milo raised his hand. If we're not sure whether it's sensor drift or real ingress, treat it as real until proven otherwise, Gina said. You can recover from a false stop. You may not recover from a real flood. When briefing ended, crews signed the new authority form and returned to work under the rewritten rule set. The physical evidence was archived, analyzed, and closed. Every report had a callback. Every warning that mattered had a record. Derek's punishment was administrative, financial, and legal, and it arrived through the same systems he had treated as obstacles. Gina walked out of Building C into clean morning air, with hazard authority leadership in her hand, and no unresolved doubt about what had happened. Physics had outranked hierarchy, exactly as it always would. The next file opened on a contractor at another plant who stood under that same steel sentence, ignored it, and lost a reactor room in 43 seconds.